So next up, we have Anton Sherin from the Guggenheim Foundation. Anton has developed a few custom extensions that allow for batch searching and modifying of records in ArchivesSpace without the use of the API. This is exciting. This includes records with identifiers, keywords, and the Managed Pop Containers module. This presentation will demonstrate how to use these tools and leave time for discussion on how they might be modified, improved, and or integrated into the data. Take it away.
Hi everyone. As she said, my name is Anton, and I work at the Guggenheim Museum in Archives. I'm basically a solo archivist there, aside from interns that I get sometimes. And we get a lot of research requests. We have, and it's, sometimes those requests are just a couple items, sometimes they're 50 to 100 or more items. And one of the things I noticed when I started about 3 years ago was that it can be very difficult to locate all of those items when you're pulling all of them across boxes that are in different locations, on-site, off-site, and that aren't always ordered sequentially. So yeah, searching for multiple objects. And I typically get an email that has a request from what someone submits from our website. But the sort of second part of that problem is that, as you can see here in that table, the folder is blank. So sometimes folder information isn't included. In fact, in a lot of cases, there weren't folder numbers added for the boxes, and some of the boxes hold, the page boxes, if there's not a lot of items in the folder, it can be 100 plus folders in the box. The other part of the problem is that sometimes the way that those folders are described are very vague. Like sometimes it'll just say general or correspondence, things that are duplicated. And that can also add a lot of time if I'm searching through a box. And there are sub-series that are listed in there that then aren't organized in the same alphabetical order that everything else in the box was. So I began thinking of workarounds, and one of the behaviors that I noticed about ArchivesSpace is that it uses search operators like booleans and or a not, and wildcards, which I'll get to a little later. And one of the booleans that I noticed could be helpful with this was or, because if you search joining things on or, it returns one, the other, or if they're both present, then both of them. And I first noticed this in the advanced search option, but the advanced search I found was really clunky for this because you have to enter things one at a time and always be adding new options below for each one, so it wasn't really an efficient way of joining the things on or. But I realized that you can just do this in the normal search by putting or in between, in this case, a bunch of accession numbers, and if those accession numbers or whatever other strings you're using are unique, it's pretty accurate. So my prototype was just a little Excel formula, concatenate to join these together into one string quickly that I could then, from a whole column of strings, that I could then drop into the search bar. And the other part of this is that I was looking for unique identifiers. The most unique one that I found that reliably pulls these back was the ref ID in the object record. So a little background on our website. It's a WordPress site that, for reasons I don't totally understand, we don't use the ArchivesSpace PUI. We export the XML, and it goes through a migration script that turns it into HTML. But one of the upsides of this is that whoever wrote the website originally added this feature of sort of a shopping cart where you can choose items, and this is really helpful for researchers to be able to select multiple items and then just submit a form to select all of them simultaneously. And then I get a nice little form request email that has all that information in it. And I was able to work with the web team to have them add those ref IDs to that table, so that then I can just grab them and concatenate them and search for them. And the next step was to sort of upgrade this to a little extension that, you know, rather than having to go to a separate window with an Excel sheet, I can just stay within that search browser, open the extension, drop in those ref IDs, and then copy it directly to the clipboard to be able to paste it into the search bar. And here you can see that pulls back those records, and then I can see it doesn't give me the locations for them, but it does give me the hierarchy, so I can see if I'm looking in a box where that is. And I'll do other things with this sometimes where I'll just like scrape these results off of the website with like a Chrome web scraper tool or something, and then it will go individually into each record and pull that information if I need the locations. But usually it's fine because the box number at least will be included. So this is great for returning multiple records quickly without using the API. And I've also found it works on TMS, Kohat, and other platforms that use Booleans. But it's a little limited, like really doesn't work on more than maybe 50 records. ArchivesSpace kind of like cries mercy when you put that number into the search bar, more than that in there. And it also relies on it being something really precise that you're searching for. I mean, I use this for other things, for searching for multiple terms for things, and it can be helpful, but you can end up pulling a lot of duplicate results. And it doesn't, pull that location information like I was talking about. It's really better for just getting the hierarchy. So the next tool, the second obstacle for me was that when I first started, a lot of the locations that we had were really only specific to aisle. They didn't go to shelf granularity, and that was adding a ton of time in places where there were a lot of boxes that were not sequentially organized by their identifier. So we did a full inventory in 2022, and as part of that, I decided that I was going to add that specificity in a shelf location. I began thinking about how I could do that efficiently. Obviously you're going to use the manage top containers modules if you're not using the API. But that still meant that it was adding a lot of time figuring out how to select all of those individual containers that weren't, that had all kinds of different indicator numbers. There wasn't an easy way to group those together that I could find. To go back to the wildcards, I noticed that in the manage top containers, if you just search for asterisk, you can return all containers in your repository unpaginated. You can also do that by like searching for has location, yes, or maybe you can search for a subgroup of things that includes all the records that you're looking for. So I wrote a little piece of JavaScript that works in the manage top containers module, and I was initially executing it in DevTools in their snippets module. And it basically, you just drop in all of those indicators. It looks in the indicator column for those, and when it finds them, it selects the checkboxes for those items so that then you can perform the bulk operations on them. It also spits out a little tab with an HTML table with a report of what it found and what it didn't. And then I moved this to to like an extension where it's a little more stable than a snippet, and it has more options around which column you're looking in for those indicators, since not everyone's going to have the columns laid out in the same way based on what's the columns that they have available or what they're choosing to have available, and it also chooses what columns you're spitting out in the little report at the end, and whether you want a report or you want to check the boxes. So here you can see it's an example of it checking boxes of non-adjacent records, and then here's an example of sort of the kind of record that the report that I end up using, which usually just has the indicator and the location if I'm looking for locations for things. And then you can go ahead with the bulk operations, and I use this for updating locations. I also use it for deleting container records when I'm doing destruction activities, since this is also the de facto repository for our records management activities. So it's great for bulk operations on unrelated containers. It's and creating reports and doing all that without using the API. It does require that initial search. You don't have to search for all the records, and judging by some of the other numbers that people have been putting out there about the number of containers in their repository, I don't recommend it if there's, it can take a long time and probably is not great for your instance if you're like trying to return 100,000 container records or something. It also, I'm a little like, I don't know if this is going to be invalidated in the future somehow by some change in the ArchivesSpace interface, so it might require updates at some point. And the other bummer is that it doesn't work in basically any other table in ArchivesSpace search, because all the other ones are paginated. I'm not sure why the M2C, maybe Brian can speak to why the manage top containers module isn't, but please don't paginate it. For now anyway. I mean, this is really, I just think of these more as like a proof of concept that they could, and the presentation being more like, please integrate this kind of functionality into ArchivesSpace, but here's the code if anyone would like to use it. And it just, I'm not from a developer background, so please test it first in a non-production environment. Yeah. So, any questions?
Thank you. I see people taking pictures, so we'll leave that up for a second, and of course all the slides will be provided after. Thank you for that. Yeah, any questions about either of these?
I have a question. My name's Tara. Hello. I have a question, and it may not necessarily be about what you're doing, but your presentation touched on two problems I have, and I just wondered if, with everybody in the room, there might be something that I'm not aware of that already does some of these things. So one is, like, when you have the toolbar displayed and it shows the hierarchy with the boxes the folders listed in a series, and it doesn't show the box and folder number. Like, is there, you know what I'm talking about? Like, is there some way to make that display that I'm not aware of, to have the box and folder number? Because otherwise you have to click into the folder to find its identifier.
My instance does show box and folder information on the right of the record in that view, so maybe there is an option to change that.
Okay, what version are you on? I'll check.
I think it's the most recent, yeah.
I'll check about that. And then the other thing was some kind of shopping cart function in the TUI. Is there such a thing? Okay.
Right.
So for your first question, that it would be great to see like screenshots, so if you want to email me or email to the listener about that. But yeah, so ArchivesSpace doesn't have like sort of population management functionality, so that's why the shopping cart isn't there. Other people deal with it in different ways. Great with those.
just in response to the shopping cart thing, Harvard's got a request list plugin that they use to integrate with Aon that does have the shopping cart feature, but that's the way you have to do it, and that's what we've done at Penn State too. I think if you read their docs, they're like, it probably works with other ones, but like we both have Aon, so it's mostly with Aon. Yeah, I wouldn't know how to do something else.
I asked the listserv, said yeah, and if anyone has any other recommendations, here to talk. But yeah, but thank you.